Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Second Page Podcast, episode 35, Red Dawn Damage Report. I'm Joseph Oswald, your host here with my good friend Stephen Johnson, producer behind the R Squared Network, and also the Big Brown Desk.
How you guys doing out there?
I think that they're all doing swell. It's been a nice week, although in this area we're expecting, about 72 days of rain straight. I think the Weather Channel just said. Well, I mean, they're telling us there's a gale warning now. So.
I see.
Yeah. So this week we are going to do a little bit of a follow-up on our esteemed president's visit to Helsinki,
Before
Finland.
you do that, why don't you just remind everybody to like and share this
Oh,
stuff?
yeah.
We're on YouTube and things
Yeah,
like that.
I forgot. Yeah, last week we got ourselves...
and Courtney's watching us.
Well, we always love when Courtney watches, participates a lot. He's a good guy. We got ourselves simultaneously streaming on Facebook and YouTube last weekend, and it's doing very well. People are enjoying the R Squared Network and watching for not just this show, but a number of other shows that you do on there. It's a pretty nice range. So if you are watching on Facebook, please go to YouTube or follow the link from our page and subscribe to our YouTube page on the R Squared Network. And if you're watching on YouTube for some reason, because like I said, it's only the second time, I'd be surprised how many people would be. But come over to Facebook, follow us there too. So this week,
come say hi.
Come say hi. Come say hi. Come say bye. Come just yell at us for some reason. Just get it off your chest. We understand.
No, we don't.
Well, I understand. I'll try. I'll try my best. So this week for episode 35, we're calling Red Dawn Damage Report. If anybody remembers that lovely movie from the 80s, it was rebooted to star the North Koreans as the invaders. It took place...
Also had Thor in it.
Yeah, did it? Was Chris Hemsworth in?
Yeah, pretty sure.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
But in any case, he saved us from many an intergalactic warlord. For some time now, the White House has approached damage control with an aggressive effort to change the subject. It's one of Donald Trump's key characteristics is he's always able to find a way to change the subject. Project and deflect. Teflon Don, as you say. So much happens so fast that it's hard to hold people's attention long enough to press a politician on issue, let alone to follow an old headline, as you may know. And people are hungry for the meat of a story. They don't really care about the beginning or the end. And it's no surprise that even Republicans are now starting to get their feathers all up over the blatantly hypocritical, ignorant, and unpresidential actions of 45. You remember when John Kerry was called a flip-flopper who didn't serve his country properly during Vietnam, and he was extricated for it, and people thought that he wouldn't be a good president? And then years later, those same Newty Republicans and huddled masses champion a flip-flopping draft dodger con man for a leader with absolutely no skills or qualifications.
When things mattered?
Things did used to matter. I would say that's why sometimes I say it was before 9/11, you know. Things that happened, it was like a different world. So the president believes Russia knows best. So what will happen when Vlad comes to visit D.C. if this isn't just some topic-changing PR stunt that will never materialize? It could go the way of the Korean summit, but it could not, which we will also be talking about today.
Though. I think that the topic-changing thing were those alleged tapes from Michael Cohen.
That changed the topic this week. Last week it was something else. So who's going to cry foul come this November? I mean, how do we know the Russians aren't going to, or somebody else might take a whack at it? You never know. There could be people that want to on all sides, so that everybody this November, I guarantee the day after the election, there's going to be 20 or 30 people, talking heads, spouting off about how whatever results happened because some kind of interference. The hashtag treason, but with the A and the S being 45, has been gaining traction on Twitter. Depends on whether or not it'll gain traction in November in Congress. The omnipresent Russians, the Koreans, the Turks, the Greeks in a globalized world, everything affects everything. So anybody that's watching, please comment today if you feel like you want to call in.
Share this
message us
with your friends.
Share this with your friends too, but especially if you want to see if they appreciate your nuanced approach to debate. So if you want your friends to see you talking to us, by all means, please share and get them to join in too. So let's start right off the top with, I think what's on everybody's mind is the
James Gunn getting fired from Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yes.
That's what's on everybody's mind.
That's what everybody's talking about.
Wrong show.
Wrong show.
I apologize.
We don't talk about pedophiles here, sir.
It is related.
I suppose. I mean, the president touches.
We'll save it for the end.
The president touches people in silly places. Mr. Gunn likes little boys that touch him in silly places. it's a whole big to-do.
It was also 10 years ago, and it was also because they fired Roseanne. They want to show that they're doing
Roseanne
this.
claims that she didn't know Valerie Jarrett was black. She said, and I quote, "I thought the bitch was white." And then she tousled her hair, took a drag of her cigarette, and yelled, again, "I thought the bitch was white." And that's why she made a Muslim Brotherhood, Planet of the Apes comment at 2 o'clock in the morning on Ambien. And then she said she lost her show because she's a Trump supporter, which clearly is not the case. It's because she's a raging lunatic racist.
I think that Disney wanted to be even-handed, and really they have a shareholder vote on the Fox merger on the 27th.
That's true.
And they didn't want to mess that up. But
$20 billion extra later. We're not talking about that today? We're not talking about it today.
But please continue.
So, damage control from Helsinki. Before we really dive into this topic, and I'm really hoping that anybody out there that's watching will also lend a bit of commentary to this historical note. And I'm sure you know I do like adding a little bit of historical context to things, because I think that we are looping through history just with better tools.
The past is so passé.
It's so passé. Yeah, you're right. The interesting thing is that the world we live in today, and what I think a lot of people take for granted and don't really understand, is built off of what happened during World War II. Just as the world before that was built off of, like the 100 Years' War between France and England. It didn't really last 100 years, but it produced, a lot of economic and political theory that we look at today as the most modern from that time, or at least of enlightenment. But the World War II post-world that we live in, it was divided up by the Allies and the victorious Soviets, I suppose, that pushed their way onto the table. Very, I guess today it would seem very normal of the Russians, politically, not the Russian people in general, but to push their way in and to be mischievous. And one of the things that I know is that at the conference at Yalta, where Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin had met to talk about Eastern Europe, Roosevelt was convinced that we could trust Stalin. I mean, after the war had ended, Churchill and some of the other allies said, now is the time, we should strike Russia. We need to destroy the Soviets now, or they're going to ruin the New World Order that we've just liberated ourselves from. They are a threat, and we need to take care of them. I mean, you're talking about the largest country in the world, who had one gun for every 8 soldiers and lost millions and millions and millions, and still were able to defeat the Nazis on the Eastern Front. But FDR trusted Stalin and thought that he would not assert so much control over the Eastern Bloc countries that were liberated by the Red Army up to the collapse of Nazi Germany. Winston Churchill said that don't trust him. We're talking about, the land of the czars, all of these people that have always wanted to be part of Europe, but for some reason the hierarchy of Europe and the Western democracies have always kind of pushed Russia to the side. So they've always had this chip on their shoulder to outperform. Stalin outperformed FDR. As FDR was dying and sick, he realized that Stalin was not going to let go of Eastern Europe, and thus the Cold War basically started with all of Eastern Europe falling under the control of the Soviet bloc, with the Western democracies having to rebuild, spend all their money, give up their colonies, borrow from the United States. And they put all of this into effect, the world that we live in today, that's now being upset again. So I don't think that there's any surprise that Vladimir Putin, who obviously ex-KGB, very familiar with the end of the war and the Cold War in general, was very easily able to manipulate and control Donald Trump, who went in there, obviously, like he said before the Korean summit, he doesn't need to take notes, he doesn't need to prepare.
This was also supposed to be the easiest of his
yeah, and guess what? He was not late meeting with Putin.
Yeah, but Putin was late for meeting with him.
Yeah,
also,
exactly. See, look where the dynamic is.
If we're talking about history, Kennedy thought he could get along with Khrushchev, or at least he thought he would do well in that meeting, and he came back realizing how severely underestimated.
Yeah, you can't underestimate
how much he underestimated
those
the situation.
Those kind of people. Like, just like you shouldn't ever underestimate, the leaders of China. I mean, these are countries and people that are thousands of years old. America is 240, 50 years old. These are proud people. They're a homogenous group. That are not a melting pot of culture and society like the United States. But if you think about going all the way back to there, Stalin trusted Hitler so much that he didn't even bother to defend the border. They thought that his deal with Hitler was sound. They were going to divide up Poland, divide up Eastern Europe, and the Germans would take the rest. And if Hitler had not betrayed Stalin, and if Stalin's wife had not died, killing the last thing that he basically loved and cared about, it's very possible to think that the entire Russian society and the entire Cold War might not have even happened or had been different. But after the war ended, there was so much distrust between the communist, Soviet, Russia, and Eastern Europe, and the democracies of Western Europe that had spent so much time and money and propaganda promoting the ideals of plurality and democracy. It wasn't something that could match up. It's so amazing how just these little things in history can affect the future so much, and people are so aware of how much one little change in the past could have been, but don't realize that right now is the past for some future, and one little thing that we do now could change things.
I just went cross-eyed. I do want to take this opportunity to tell everyone to seek out and find the film Death of Stalin.
I was thinking about that while
amazing.
while I was saying that, and you had done very well with your synopsis of it in convincing me that it would be a good movie to watch, and I really do want to watch it. Isn't Jeffrey Tambor in that movie too?
Yes, we should do like a commentary of that movie.
Anyways, why not? I mean, if we can get the rights to live stream it with commentary, kind of like Mystery Science Theater.
No. The way you do it is...
It'll be, instead of Mystery Science Theater 3000, be Political Science Theater 101.
There you go. But the way you do that is you just record, you don't show the video, right? Mm-hmm. And you tell everyone, okay, we're starting it now, and so they're watching it on some other screen while we are talking about it. So we're actually not using anybody.
It's kind of like Dark Side of the Moon, when you play Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon album with The Wizard of Oz, to call it Dark Side of Oz. And you started on the second Roar of the Lion, play the movie on silent, but the album goes with it, like scene for scene, frame by frame. It's amazing. If you've never done Dark Side of Oz, it's incredible. You'll want to do it again right afterwards. It's amazing.
Okay, now talk to me about, do we want to do, okay, let's talk about treason. Let's get the elephant.
Get it out of the, well, the elephant.
Is treason too large of an accusation?
I think it's a excitable and dramatic accusation, and I would agree with your assessment that it is a bit of a large accusation.
I didn't say that. I just said, is it?
Is it? Well, yeah, I would say yes. Then it's a leading question, but I would definitely say yes. It's a bit of a stretch accusation, because treason involves providing aid and comfort to your enemy. But I don't know if we have necessarily determined 100% that Russia is an enemy, nor have we determined that the president has sold like state secrets or done something treasonous. I mean, he may have done something wrong before he became president, but I think that it's still a little unfair to assume as president that he's committed treason, which that would be the grounds for impeachment. Do
me a favor while I go on a rant really quickly.
Go for it.
I want you to look up the definition of treason. Now, here's the thing about this. To say that they are not an enemy is to say that okay, we're just right in the screen.
I just wanted people to make sure that they saw that is where I'm going to look up the definition of treason.
So,
treason, Article 3, Section 3, page 13.
Okay, so to say that they're not an enemy is almost to say that we do not accept the findings of our intelligence community that say that they attacked our election. Mm-hmm. The thing that makes us us.
Yes, only Congress can formally declare war.
There's like elections and racism that makes America America, but you know what I'm saying. Now, if we can all agree, if we can agree that they have attacked us, mm-hmm. right? Then how can we not call them an enemy, and how can we not say that him meeting with an adversary of ours in private, considering until he got the bad press, considering giving up one of our ambassadors for questioning. Right? Like, and then inviting him to the White House.
I hate to cut you off on that, but I don't know if he had considered it. I think that's what the Russians had asked for.
No. He said it was a great idea. And then when they asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders about it in the press briefing, she says that the president literally said he was considering it. That the White House was considering it.
I mean, it gives some benefit of the doubt. I mean, you have to consider everything. Whether or not that's something that would have ever taken place, the American president handing over an ambassador to a foreign power, I don't think that was ever a reasonable consideration to make. Just as I don't think it's reasonable that Congress decided that they wanted to try and subpoena the translator that was in the room because they wanted to know what Trump had spoken about, but to subpoena a translator who's basically sworn an oath to their career and to whatever God translators believe in, that they don't disseminate what they've discussed, that they're there simply to translate and that's it, kind of like an attorney-client privilege or a doctor's privilege with you.
Do you not think that the Russians had people in there recording that thing?
I'm positive that Vladimir Putin himself probably had a little recorder on him because he's got the upper hand the entire way. There's no reason that he would have to feel worried going into that room, that he would say anything. Donald Trump was completely on the defensive because the Russians can watch TV from America. They can see exactly, what kind of
Alaska.
Yeah, they can watch some Sarah Palin's TV from her living room. They know that he was coming in with a Congress and people questioning his motives and intents. What was his motive and intent for even setting up the meeting in the first place and completely catching even his own advisors off guard when saying that he was inviting Putin to come in to visit Washington?
And again, we have to look at all this in context. This is in the context of him shitting all over the EU at every stop he made in Europe.
Yeah, talking smack about Montenegro, which is a country that during the breakup of Yugoslavia
sort of borders Russia.
No, not really. Broke away from Serbia. It's in a Russian influence.
And there are a lot of Russians
sphere of influence.
But here's the thing.
They tourist there.
Look, I just want to put this out there. There are a lot of Russians that own land there.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
They tour. It's a huge tourism spot.
Montenegro, what'd you say? It used to be a part of the
It's
the
broke
Soviet
away from
Union?
Serbia, got its independence in 2006. But
Okay.
even before that, was still supporting the United States in the war in Afghanistan.
But my point is this. It is in Russia's backyard.
Yes.
Russia has taken
Front yard.
Crimea.
Yes.
Right? Who is to say that that's not next on Russia's list? Trump puts it out there, maybe we won't defend him after a meeting with Russia? Putin, who wants to put back together
the old Soviet blocs.
Yes.
That's why I said during the last episode.
The thing that would stop him from doing that is NATO.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump is shitting all over NATO.
I mean, even if you take the United States out of the equation, NATO does not, even with 28 other countries, NATO does not, it's not like an easy win, like a trade war with Russia. The United States is the backbone, the muscle, and the eyes and ears of NATO. We contribute 3.6% of our GDP, but a substantial portion of the overall NATO budget. In places like Montenegro, where they have a 2,000-member army, and they've been supporting us since we activated Article 5 of NATO treaty on 9/11.
The
only ones to do it.
World War II.
They've been with us for going on 17 years now, and they've only been a country for 12 years. They've been supporting us, and Donald Trump goes around Europe belittling Theresa May, Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, belittling the little countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Montenegro, saying that maybe we wouldn't have to defend them, as if he thinks that it's immediately going to cost American lives, when it was perfectly reasonable during the war in Bosnia when Clinton just sent B-2 bombers. We didn't lose a single soldier.
You're assuming that he's worried about American lives.
I don't.
I'm
not assuming that. I'm assuming members of Congress who'd have to declare war.
He is signaling that he will not defend them. And again, this is in Russia's backyard. Look, you gotta look.
Technically in the backyard.
It's right in front of us. right? And because we're so scared, I think, of those things actually being true, we don't want to say it. Like, there are people that don't want to call Trump a liar. They'll say he has issues with the truth, or he says things that are inaccurate, right? Because the idea of calling the President of the United States a liar has so many more implications. But what do you call someone who doesn't tell the truth all the time? Right?
A Trump.
Now, what do you call someone who... And again, this is what's so interesting about the report that the Mueller team introduced the other day, which was on the very day that Trump, in one of his campaign speeches, said, "Russia, if you're listening, I want you to hack those emails." That's the day they go out and put things into motion. Well,
I mean, we talked about that last week, but Clemson University has been putting together a bunch of information they've compiled from 2014 to 18. And this is just one bit of this many-page report. Just on October 6th, 18,000 individual tweets that were meant to adjust public political perception of Hillary Clinton were sent out by Russian operatives all over Russia and parts of the United States and Canada, sent through different servers and bots that were meant to dispel the idea that Donald Trump was bad, likening him to touched by God, that Hillary Clinton's evil. 70% of those people that were targeted, the accounts that were targeted, were Hillary supporters, her constituency, liberals, environmentalists, minority groups, stuff like that were trying to sow discord between her and the Bernie Sanders supporters and the Jill Stein, whatever, that were just trying to get Democrats to fight each other. The very next day, on October 7th, is when WikiLeaks started leaking all of the emails from the hacked DNC servers, from Podesta's emails, her chair. All this comes out at the exact same time, showing that there was coordination between Russia and WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks had coordination with the Trump campaign, which we're seeing through the Mueller investigation and through Manafort's possible trial.
Not just Manafort's, there's Roger Stone also.
Yeah, all of the people the 5 people that have pled guilty, the Flynns and whatnot, and but all of these people, they worked together, and they thought that having such an elaborate ring would make it impossible for them to be caught. But if you remember from things like the Panama Papers, that if you get enough people working together, even like with the Panama Papers, it was journalists from around the world working together without breaking rank and without spilling the beans. If you get enough people working together, they can prove this beyond a doubt.
Also,
Panama Papers was buried, but
again, the other thing that the point that I'm trying to drive home is sometimes you have to call a spade, right? Like, how many people that worked on this campaign lied about or straight up had illegal dealings with Russia?
Dozens at least.
Right?
It's looking like.
Now, again, look at his words, right? He is doing the things that around the world that would be in Putin's best interest, in Russia's best interest, right? Again, our enemies, he has terrible things to say. I mean, our friends, he has terrible things to say. And then he goes to Russia, and he doesn't want anyone in the room. We've already shown with Lavrov and these guys, Sergei Lavrov, when the ambassador came here, that he shared some secrets about Israel, some Israeli military action. So he's already shared secrets with them right in front of us. You have the Russian Twitter account agreeing with him, right?
They say tens of millions of people were hit by those Twitter, just messages from those accounts.
No, not only that. What I'm saying is right before he goes over to the NATO stuff, goes over to the EU stuff before he goes to meet with Merkel and Theresa May and all that stuff. He was saying something about how stupid America is and the whole Russia thing is made up. And then you had the Russian official Twitter account saying, "We agree."
But that is why this episode specifically is about damage control, because this is the first time that Trump looks like he he's caught off guard by being pressed on an issue, where he's going back and instead of saying that something is fake news, he's actually going back and saying that he misspoke, which he never does.
Oh, that was also the dumbest thing I ever. I said wouldn't instead of would. It's sort of a double negative. Look, how obviously he thinks we're stupid, right? Mm-hmm. But again,
well, he knows that the people listening to him, like really listening to him, will believe him.
What else do you call this? I get that it's crazy that we're in the upside down right now. Yeah. But how else can you explain
to answer
this?
Courtney's question, define aid, you had asked before the definition of treason, which is Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court.
No one in the meeting room.
Yes. So you need 2 witnesses to confess that treason occurred, and they have to also say it in open court, and that treason only applies to
Carlos,
levying war against the United States, which Trump has technically not done, I guess. I mean, it's not war if it's not declared, I guess a lot of people could say. And in adhering to their enemies, which, again, I don't know if we have decided whether or not Russia is necessarily like an actual enemy or if like a Cold War enemy, like a frenemy kind of thing. We're certainly not friends. We're certainly, it's not like that.
If the intelligence community says they attacked us, right? Putin in the press conference says, yes, I wanted Trump to win, right? Mm-hmm. And then against everybody's better judgment, you're just going to have him over as an honored guest. And again, the whole Montenegro thing is like, that's not some idiot savant shit.
No.
Oh, did we even talk about the Russian spy that was over here?
Butrina or whatever. Yeah. I did want to talk about it only because it is just tantalizing. Like, I mean, it really honestly feels like Clancy wrote this or something like that. But I would like to actually wait and see how this one.
If Tom Clancy wrote the book of what's happening right now, I'd be like, this is fantasy.
Yeah, it's way too fantasy. Far off. But it just seems so scarily, like it's so like live clickbait kind of thing. Like I'm really worried about like going into it and then finding out that it was something they put up to make.
Actually Kerry Russell's acting.
Yeah, like they just wanted it to look like, oh look, people are willing to believe anything. Look, they believed a prostitute was working as a Russian agent while dating an American and spying on him and stuff like that. Like, I've literally seen a movie like that. I've literally seen that kind of stuff, I think, in Black Mirror, probably. Whatever happened to that woman that we talked about in an episode, I'm embarrassed for forgetting her name, but that model that fled to Thailand and said she had information on Donald Trump completely disappeared. She disappeared. And the model...
yeah, I know what you mean, but you knew she wasn't getting out.
You see, like, Melania's face after meeting Putin. She's like, I was thinking to myself, I posted it on my personal Facebook, that, she had the face of someone who's like, she just met with someone who knows something about her or something, like it was fear. And she's like, it's either like he's got the tape of Donald Trump getting peed on and the girl peeing on him was Melania when she was younger, or he's about to invade her country and, like, subjugate them like he would like to do with Montenegro, Serbia.
I don't think the P tape matters. No. Maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Again, we have to just understand that Donald Trump in the 80s or the early 90s was over $1 billion in debt, bankrupt. No one would give him any money until he came up with the brilliant idea, which he didn't come up with it, to license his name. Mm-hmm. Because no one would lend him money, his name is on a bunch of buildings because people use his name, give him whatever percentage of what the building makes. But this was a way for Russian oligarchs to launder their money.
Exactly. 100% agree.
And we still have not seen this guy's taxes. That is what this is about. They got him out of bankruptcy. They have been funneling money through his organizations, and he was willing to accept it. And I don't think he thought he was going to win, but he did, and now He just realizes.
Well, because even if he didn't win, it was a great way for them to launder their money and to get his profile up too.
No, I mean, but this wasn't like a grand scheme where we're gonna turn him into president. I'm saying the man is compromised.
Oh yeah.
And you cannot say that he is not compromised until he releases his tax returns, which he is not gonna do. There is a reason he does not want to release them.
Well, so a couple of states have passed laws that state that if a person running for president does not release like 5 years worth of tax returns, that they can't be on the ballot for president or win the electoral votes. Yeah, but it makes you wonder, though, is this like a blue wave that's coming to wash away the blood-stained red from this almost civil war-torn nation? Or is, like the title suggests, is a red dawn coming for a new day for conservative, nationalist, hegemonic America?
Flip a coin.
I mean, honestly, it really does seem like it comes down to that. But, you know, mentioning Montenegro, and I'm really happy that you are informed on that, because it seems like nobody cares about these little countries. But, like, the world is getting more and more divided. Like, tribalism is causing us to go from where we had, like, 12 countries to now we have 200 countries. But the Russians have also just recently been kicked out of Greece because the Greeks are working out a deal with Macedonia, which is a country to the north, where Alexander the Great is supposed to be from. Everybody thinks he's Greek, but he's really Macedonian, because it used to be part of Greece. You know, the king of Macedonia, you know, was a big deal back in those ancient times. So Macedonia is agreeing with Greece to change the name of their country to North Macedonia, so that Macedonia can ascend to NATO and the European Union, you know, the whole economic zone. Greece, only one member needs to object, and then the guy and whoever it is doesn't get in. So Greece objected because they said Macedonia's name suggested that they wanted to claim the territory of Macedonia, which is in northern Greece, by the same name. So they're like, we'll change the name of our whole country. We just want to be a part of it. We need to get away from Russia because they own everything. You know, like they buy everything. Their money is everywhere. They own the country.
Will Russia allow that?
But the Russians don't. So they've been kicked out of Greece because they've been buying supporters, like paid actors, as Republicans would say, to protest in Macedonia and in Athens, to be against this deal, to get on Twitter and social media and start saying, you know, all kinds of crazy lies and distortions and stuff like that to try and scuttle this deal. So they both just kicked out all the Russian ambassadors and spies and whatever that they thought were there. And that is something that the Russians are doing everywhere. It's not just in Greece, where they were bribing clerics in the church and bribing officials and stuff like that to make sure that this doesn't happen. Because Macedonia is theirs. They think Macedonia is theirs, just like they thought Montenegro was theirs, or Serbia, or Belarus, or whatever, you know, Poland. They're getting. He is rebuilding the old KGB. He
right.
really is. Okay,
now how about what Russia did in regards to North Korean missile development? They just blocked North Korean sanctions, I believe, or something like that.
Well, the Russians block a lot of stuff. Either Russia or China will usually block something in the Security Council, you know, that's proposed to sanction North Korea in some form or fashion. I'm not terribly familiar with what you had mentioned, but, you know, speaking of North Korea, you know, the meeting that was supposed to happen a week or two ago between the Americans and the North Koreans to get back the Korean War dead Americans didn't happen at first because the North Korean guys skipped to go to a potato farm. And then Donald Trump, if you remember, said that if things don't work out, he'll make up something so that he can get out of it, because he won't admit that he was wrong with North Korea. But he is being interviewed by CBS and said that the...
okay, so here it is. Sorry. Oh. Russia and China block the U.S. rebuke over United Nations North Korea oil sanction.
I don't know anything about that, but I mean, it sounds like something that either of them would have done individually, let alone together. The Russians and the Chinese, I think, are working very well together. The Russians are pretty much the best in the world right now at playing two sides against each other for their own benefit.
Yeah, so basically, Axios reports that the Russia and China on Thursday blocked the U.S. from getting the United Nations to publicly point fingers at North Korea for smuggling more petroleum products beyond the limit imposed by the UN sanction.
Well, I mean, that wouldn't even be the first time they helped him a couple of years ago. Russian and Chinese oil tankers were disguised so that they could sneak oil and weapons into North Korea.
But here's the point, or the problem there, I should say, is that I thought that the meeting was supposed to make us friends with Russia, right? And what do? In the first chance they get, they block some shit we're working on.
Well,
so,
I mean,
so where's the
Donald
friendship?
Trump would very easily pull us out of the United Nations if he could. There is no friendship there. Just like, we were supposed to have this great deal with North Korea. June 20th in Duluth, Minnesota, Trump has one of his pep rallies where he just goes on and people don't listen until he says something aggressive, and then they're all like, yeah, lock her up, Trump that bitch, blah blah blah. We're civil.
It's crazy that will continue to work.
Yeah, and it still
what
is.
What about
for some
Obama and lock Hillary up?
So he had said at that rally that they got back 200 remains of Korean War dead because the parents of those soldiers were calling him and were really concerned, which would mean that those people were well over 100 years old to be parents of the Korean War dead, asking for their remains back in 2018 for a war that ended 60 years ago. He said they got back 200, but the actual reported amount says that 55 sets of human remains have been delivered to the United States.
Are you sure they're human?
Trump on July 14th on CBS interview says that he does not know if he says the remains may not even be remains. Me personally, I'm like, after 60 years, one of the most impoverished countries in the world, after 60 years somehow was able to maintain and keep the remains of American war dead, their most vitriolic enemy, and they did not do anything to disrespect these remains. They kept them all together. These weren't these are things that you would think were in a mass grave or a dog's stomach somewhere with the way North Koreans talk about Americans. And Trump actually went in there thinking we were going to get back thousands of human bodies from Americans that died and were left behind because we were overwhelmed by 1 million Chinese communist soldiers.
So what you're saying is the one thing we thought, the one fruit of, the one thing that we thought was a fruit of the Trump and North Korea meeting, we didn't even get that.
No, it was a terrible fruit. It was laced with apples and cyanide and razors, and could make you fall asleep until you were kissed by a beautiful prince.
Why are you confusing with apples with cyanide and razors?
Oh, because that's always the fear that people have, that somebody's going to stick a razor or poison their apple at Halloween, and also Sleeping Beauty or Snow White or whatever her name was. And Donald Trump wishes that he was Snow White and the Putin would come and kiss him and wake him up from this nightmare of a witch hunt.
Okay.
It's just funny to think how much is in the pocket.
Anything else on
that.
Wait, so one more thing.
I did want to mention something about South Korea because I think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, but about Russia. Mm-hmm. So I have two questions. First, I asked if it's too outrageous, just the political angle of this for the Democrats, if it's too outrageous. Mm-hmm. If you can't run on treason, mm-hmm. I just don't think you can win anything ever, right? These are guys that ran on saying that, the liberals want to take your guns away and they want to have abortions after the baby's born. Yeah. And you know what I mean?
Postnatal abortions.
Right?
Yeah.
And those are the kind of enemies they created. And if we think it's too far to just say, you know what? He's a treasonous traitor who trades, right? You weren't winning back any of his voters anyway.
No.
Right? So just
why
say
not
it.
Go for it? Just go for gold. That's what we've mentioned a lot of times on the show, is that it seems like Democrats are not willing to commit to just one thing. They won't just go for gold like Republicans have. You see something and you take it, and it's not necessarily a good thing, but that's just what Republicans have done. They to hell with rules and tradition and regular order. If we can take something now, get away with it, even if we get punished later, we're going to take it right now. Democrats don't seem like which is good in a way that they don't act like this, but in another way, if you are always on the defensive, you're going to lose. No one's ever won a defensive war.
Also, the other thing to think about is, I think in a lot of Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan types' minds, like, it's worth it.
I know. That's what I'm saying. It's worth it to them. They're making tons of money.
Not only the money. So, yes, Paul Ryan, all about the tax cuts and kicking people off of healthcare and social services, right?
Despite that's what got him through his whole life.
Yes, but again, I will come back to the time when I told you that Paul Ryan was a fucking scumbag. But whatever. Now, Mitch McConnell knows that he can restructure the federal courts. And that is something that is going to last. These are lifetime appointments, right? That is going to last for a generation
or two.
So if it means that they lose control for a few years, it doesn't matter. No. They got these permanent tax cuts for these corporations, and then they're getting these judges. So let the clown be a clown, and maybe we'll lose the next 2 or 3 elections. So what? It's worth it.
That's a great segue into, because I mentioned I wanted to say something about South Korea, but that's exactly what I kind of want to point out. In South Korea, they have a really nice concept of democracy that you like. You know, where something goes wrong with a government that you've elected to protect you and to regulate and to do things right and make things peaceful and good, and they mess up and you hold them accountable. You know, a ferry that was poorly inspected, that, you know, the people were bribed and got away with, you know, not inspecting this ferry and securing cargo, capsized with 304 people on board, most of whom were a bunch of high school students, the boat sank with them upside down and able to look outside these windows and watch them go under, and then they died slowly, suffocating at the bottom of a river because no one could help them because the crew escaped and told people to stay in their cabins. The crew members were arrested. Members of the Coast Guard were tried and prosecuted. Members of inspection teams, government officials were tried and sent to prison and fined. The families of these victims were paid $400,000-500,000 American dollars, millions of won. The president of South Korea was impeached, tried, and arrested for corruption, though the original intent was the parliament wanted to.
Wait, when did this happen?
This year, just recently, the president of South Korea is a new president. Moon Jae-in is a new president in South Korea because it was Park, President Park, I think it was one of the first female president of South Korea, was arrested on charges that she tried to extort money from Samsung and all these other companies. But originally, it started with anger, just protests that would not relent for the way the government handled the situation and how they let 304 mostly teenage and young children die, you know, because a couple people wanted to make a little extra money. And they went after everybody. They held everybody accountable. If something like that happens here pretty much every day, and we do nothing but talk and ask each other why, and then we move on to the next topic. That, I think, is something that I really would like to point out, that we spread democracy around the whole world over the past 50, 60 years. We spread all this democracy, and now when it's supposed to be working at home, it is looked at as fascism. It's looked at as communism or socialism, or it's bad for America, or get your guns because they're coming to take them. Rather than believe that we just want to live in a country where the government that we elect is actually looking out for us and not themselves, their own personal interests. That the greater good for the country is a more dominant thought in our politicians' heads than their next election.
Yeah, I mean, and it sort of highlights the whole Peter Strzok thing, which was like I mean, every day is like almost a disgrace. But you know, the system. Look, if at best, right, Trump is just kicking the tires on the system.
Hi, Debbie. Thanks for watching.
Right? Like Trump is saying, okay, you got a nice little constitution you got there. Yeah. shame if something happened to it, right? But,
yeah.
let's see if the system is designed to take this thing on. And we will see
It's like a stress test for the Constitution.
Right. And we will see what happens with the Mueller investigation. Now, unless that gets canceled, which they're trying to do every day, right? They're trying to get rid of it. But
it just keeps getting renewed by the network. So
yeah. Also,
we want to cancel the Mueller show,
right? But it also gets renewed by some questionable action that the administration does that just lets people know, like, oh shit, you can't cancel this. Because people were talking about, oh man, Americans are getting tired of the Mueller investigation. Then he goes to Russia, and it's like, fuck, this guy's a fucking traitor.
Well, yeah, and you a goddamn traitor.
You can't cancel the Mueller investigation now.
That show's about to win Emmys.
Okay. So aside from that,
yeah,
Michael Cohen.
Michael Cohen.
What do you think about this? These tapes that come out.
I've seen
Cohen tapes, not to be confused with the P tapes.
Yeah. It's just interesting hearing that because my dad's last name was Cohen, so it's every time I hear that I'm like, what did we do? What happened? But I see both sides of it in a small way. I understand that
you can't say both sides is canceled. You can't say both sides anymore.
Listen, double negatives is how Donald Trump became president. I will be a big-time podcast radio host with my double negatives.
Okay.
So I can see how anybody would be like, whoa, someone's being recorded without their knowledge. That's not fair. Attorney-client privilege, you can't seal, the FBI can't take that. That's something they discussed in private. That shouldn't be allowed. Because I don't want that to happen to me. But am I ever going to be in this situation? Probably not. So does it warrant an extenuating circumstance to say, let the FBI figure out what the hell happened? Yes. I mean, Donald Trump asked the Russians to find a bunch of emails. Why can't the FBI go and find this? But funny thing is, New York state law, does not prohibit that kind of action. It is perfectly legal for one person in a conversation to record the conversation without the other person knowing in New York State.
But so two things about this. Firstly, yes, it is legal for two normal people to do that. And it's probably not illegal in the sense of going to jail. However, if you are a lawyer, you may buck up against some ethics rules, which could cause you to be disbarred.
Absolutely, he would.
Now,
absolutely. But then again, no.
I think those are the least of his problems.
Remember that he's not releasing the tapes. Yes, he recorded them. That might be able to get him disbarred, but it's not illegal, so he probably wouldn't be disbarred. And he didn't release them. The FBI seized them. So I think Michael Cohen is playing this very safe. He knows that it's very unlikely that he's going to get in any more trouble than he's in right now. He's already looking to be granted immunity from prosecution by Mueller, which is the federal version of granting a presidential pardon. Trump can pardon all the people he wants, but Mueller can grant immunity from prosecution, which is basically the same thing if they talk.
Also, Cohen is being Trump can only pardon people on federal crimes.
Correct.
The Cohen thing is a New York thing.
Yes.
So he could not. He would go to state.
Which is why he was, bitching about Eric Schneiderman, and then all of a sudden Eric Schneiderman gets brought down for, being abusive towards women in his sexual escapades.
Now here's the other part of this though. The only way this tape could have been released, the reason we know about it is if the Trump team signed a waiver. Right? That's why we know about it. And listen to what we're hearing about on the tape, which was, yes, Trump knew about it. That's bad. But here's the good part of it for Trump. He said, pay her with a check so that there is a record for it. And the payment was never made. Well, so my point is, this gives people a little bit of things to talk about. And notice they said the other tapes, there's really nothing of importance on it. This is the big thing.
Well, listen, I think especially for our viewers, but you also you have to pull the camera back just a little bit, not literally, but on this issue, because Giuliani had also said that this tape basically would provide exculpatory evidence to show that the president.
Explain to the viewers what exculpatory.
It would basically
and
show
by the
that
viewers,
he was,
I meant me.
Yeah, it would basically show that he was innocent, that he meant no harm in going forward with this. But while he may have said pay her with a check, which implies knowledge and intent to pay her off, the thing was that he never intended to directly pay her, just like Stormy Daniels was never directly paid. She was paid through a shell company that's set up by Michael Cohen. Donald Trump had Ms. McDougal, the other Playboy model, he had an affair with right after Barron Trump was born, or during his marriage to Melania, that the story would be picked up by the National Enquirer. They would buy the rights to her story, exclusive rights to her story, and also promote her fitness career. She was becoming a fitness guru or whatever. And instead of running her story and promoting her through their magazine, they paid her the money through the National Enquirer and then sat on it. It's called Catch and Kill. Sat on the story so that it couldn't be released before the election, because it was right before the election that this all happened, because the National Enquirer owners are friends with Donald Trump. And then afterwards, Donald Trump basically reimbursed the National Enquirer by paying them for certain things that he didn't need. Is basically like washing the money, which that is the link that's set up right there. He didn't pay. He paid her. Her is the National Enquirer with a check. They buy out them, reimburse the National Enquirer for buying the story and crushing it.
It's good that you explain that, but I'm coming at this from a different angle, which is we only know about these recordings because the Trump team wants us to know about them. And it was designed to change the news cycle because the Russia thing wasn't playing well for them.
I'm not necessarily. I mean, I could be wrong, and it's been known to happen.
And also, the fact that they're classifying it as exculpatory evidence, and I mean,
Giuliani's just saying it is. It's not classified as such. It's not classified as such.
That doesn't make it true. But what I'm saying is, these tapes could have been worse, and maybe there are more of them. But I'm just saying, understand that they had.
Yeah, it's like a 2-minute long tape.
They had to.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I could be wrong because it has happened before. I don't know that they necessarily had to sign off on it, because these are things that were seized in, like you said, this is a state proceeding. This is not federal court. This isn't the Mueller investigation. That the information that they have and the things that they've seized, while yes, the Trump team could allow that information to come out, it's very possible that someone either leaked that they had seized that information, or that they just said that they had it. That it's not something that they're hiding from anybody, because they're eventually going to bring charges. So I don't know. Maybe, I mean, if you can find out where it said that they have to sign off on it. I don't know that the Trump team had to sign off on it, because it's not really the Trump team. Again, it's Michael Cohen and his team, and he is cooperating. He may have just said, "Fine, do it. I'm not going to fight you on it. Just do it," because it looks like he's trying to cooperate in order.
Also, how do you feel about Michael Cohen tweeting, like quoting Walter Cronkite about the importance of the free press, while in a case
he has a family. He has a family
for trying to kill a story. I can't.
Listen, he has a family that he says his loyalty lies with them, not with the president. I don't doubt his conviction that way, but I've also heard a lot of not a lot, but I've heard some of the tapes of proceedings between Michael Cohen and other people where he was a severe bully, and I understand that he's also willing to say anything to get out of a situation and to win, because that's what lawyers like himself do. I don't know what's going to happen to him. I know that the Manafort trial's coming up soon, and that Giuliani has hinted at a presidential pardon. He's like, no, we can't guarantee that, but it might clean this whole mess right up.
It doesn't clean it for state charges. That doesn't.
But that's why I was talking about Manafort.
Okay, Manafort. Sorry.
These are all happening at the same time. So if Manafort is the test run for keeping someone quiet by offering a pardon, the thing still is, though, that you have to be convicted of a crime in order to get a pardon. So that's the only downside, is that you still have to go through the process of trial and conviction, your whole reputation, everything. You might still get pardoned, but what is that going to be? It's different than when you're guaranteed immunity and you just never get charged in the first place. There's no record anywhere. Even Joe Arpaio technically has a record. The sheriff that was pardoned by the president for contempt of court charges. This is just analogous to the situation that we seem to be ending up in our country, where just looking at around the world and you look at this macro view, it's just these authoritarian dictators are rising all over the world. People like Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, who's just seized all these powers. He's writing these dozen-page presidential decrees changing the way education and the courts and government and everything is run. Vladimir Putin, who's been in charge for decades, seemingly, who's seen 3 presidents come and go in the United States, and Donald Trump is somehow very closely tied to him. You can see the way that Vladimir Putin comports himself. The level of power and control and authority he has is impressive and enviable, and you could see why Donald Trump is attracted to the allure of limitless power that Putin displays, but wanting to do that in America. And so easy to fall for, but it's so hard to escape from. And that's why, I'm talking about, how the tribalist society, I mean, if you ever are driving and you see someone with a license plate from a different state, you immediately think something about them that's not necessarily good. And I would say that's true for most people. In New Jersey, if you're driving and you see, excuse me, Pennsylvania driver, you're like, oh my God, Pennsylvania drivers don't know how to drive, or New York drivers don't know how to drive. And then we're over there, they say the same thing about us. We break things down even by state, and then within your state, you're like, oh my, I live in one town with another town over, and we're always competing with them, or oh, we don't want those type of people in our town. Let's split off and form another town, and that's why there's 500 and some odd municipalities in New Jersey, because people just do that. They split up. They keep splitting up to give room for the expansion of the dominant part of that tribe. And that is what the world that we're going into today, except that people like Vladimir Putin and Rodrigo Duterte and Erdogan and the president, Xi Jinping in China, they have homogenous societies of people that are easy to control and are used to authoritarian governments. America is not like that. We are headed for something very big in our future, and I've said this time and time again, I do believe we will be alive during the next civil war. I mean, you have a president that consistently is hypocritical. I'm just saying, that you have a president that is hypocritical and ignorant of everything and is perfectly willing to take any step necessary to stay in power. We've just recently gotten over a giant recession, which is something that a lot of people didn't think that we would get out of, but it's caused a lot of divides in America, especially along economics. We've got Donald Trump politicizing every single thing that used to not even be, like the Federal Reserve. We have Jerome Powell. He appointed him. He's raised the rate to 1.75% now, saying that we're going to raise it 2 more times. And now Trump, breaking from presidential tradition going back forever, is criticizing the Federal Reserve because he says, during a booming economy, you shouldn't raise interest rates, even though that's exactly what you do to prevent inflation. But at the same time, all of his tariffs are going to cause inflation. So the normal response to inflation is to raise rates, to raise interest rates, so people save their money and stop spending it so much and stop causing prices to rise.
Also,
but you can't do that.
That is the other part of sort of all these jobs that exist now that are available.
They're bubble
now.
Jobs.
People are making a bunch of money, so they're making more money. Things will cost more. These are the effects of it. You almost have to raise interest rates. Not to mention, you gave a bunch of people money back with this tax law thing.
While all this stuff is happening, they want to make those permanent.
You lower taxes during a recession to give people more money to spend. Now, when the economy is doing good, you either raise taxes or at the very least keep them the same so you could pay down some of the debt that you accrued when you were trying to build back up the economy. But
now we're going to $1 trillion deficits. Like, that's even...
And again,
that's not even a word.
Deficit hawks.
I just think that it's amazing that we still have that kind of a situation, though. And the one thing I think that a lot of people aren't paying attention to, because it's really hard to pay attention to like numbers and like stuff that takes a little bit of comprehension.
I want to talk about the EU fine on Google. They fined them $5 billion.
Oh yeah, I've read about that. But really quickly, and we'll go on into that right after this. But crap. Now I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, no, these things happen. But so one thing that I wanted to mention before about the Fed chair, Paul Volcker, who I think we have the Volcker rule from, worked for Kennedy, worked for Carter, worked for Reagan, is credited with ending the hyperinflation from the 70s and the recessions and stuff we had during then, even worked for a Democrat, worked for a Republican. You have that kind of spending from the government, it usually does help. And people don't understand that when a recession is coming, it takes like 6-7 months for people to realize that it's happening. And here's what I was going to say is one thing that's really hard to understand, but it seems like very accurate, is this thing. I think it's called the invert yield curve, where the yield on the long term and short term notes are basically now the same when the short terms are supposed to be higher than the long. So if the long term dips below the short, I think it could be the other way around. I'm just trying to recall this from a reading. Then that has been a predictor over the past 60 years of recessions. Every single time that has happened, we've entered a recession. And right now, the curve is even.
By the way, all the big banks are doing amazing right now, right?
Isn't that weird?
JP just had something like a 16 or 18% increase in profits.
Mm-hmm.
Citi had 14%. Goldman had 44% increase in profits year over year.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking billions of dollars per quarter.
No, but these are the effects of the tax laws coming in place.
And they're taking all that money and they're stashing it other places. They're not keeping it in America. They're not investing
they are
buying things, proving jobs.
Well, they are, and I don't want to spend about this too long just because I work.
No, I mean we'll go to Google.
But they are investing in, hiring. Like they are.
Yeah, I mean they are, but then that bubble is going to pop, and we're going to have a lot of pissed off people ready to go to the polls. So yeah, that fine.
Not rooting for that, by the way.
The fine that Google got, I think it's interesting because you have a lot of Americans saying that this is just the EU coming after American tech companies to punish them for politics.
Well, that's what Trump is saying. But here's the thing: this is an ongoing thing, and this case was brought to the attention of the EU by the likes of Amazon and Google and I think Facebook or something like that, and or some other people. The point is, it was about sort of abusing their market position, right?
Yeah.
And this one, it was as it relates to Android. So now, Android is technically open source, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, if you want to have access to the Google Play Store, because every phone is about the apps,
you have to have their system.
You have to take Gmail, you have to take YouTube, you have to take Google Docs and all their other suites, which I think you have to pay them for. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But the point is...
And they've been paying producers to pre-install their stuff and make it mandatory to keep.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
That's part of the lawsuit, part of the fine.
Right. So you have to do that. And this is not unlike what Microsoft got in trouble for in the early 2000s with their antitrust stuff, where they were forcing people to use Internet Explorer and whatever.
Yeah, that was the rise of Mozilla Firefox. And
right. But again,
the Netscapes.
Here's the thing.
Good old days.
When that happened, because Bill Gates, before he was like the big philanthropist that everybody loves, the teddy bear now, back then he was the villain, and he was saying, like, forcing me to do this browser ballot thing where they give you the opportunity to select your browser. He's like, that's like asking Coca-Cola to include a can of Pepsi in every 12-pack of sodas they sell. But the point is, it was better for the industry, right? Because we saw the rise of Chrome as the dominant browser just because they were better, right? And so there's this idea of the tyranny of the default that says whatever you're stuck with, whatever you start with, that's just what people will keep. And Google has used that. And there's a lot of other things that they've been doing with their search, but this was related to Android. And obviously, it's not done. They will appeal. But
honestly, I don't even know about that. We're talking about a company that has $100 billion in cash on hand, and they made billions of dollars in the first quarter of the year alone. That $5 billion has changed. It's nothing to them. That's why it's easy to see that this looks like political targeting.
It's not just the $5 billion though, right? And again, this was going on way before the tariffs. This case is from years ago. They just came to a decision now. Google has more influence on your life than Microsoft ever did, right? And they forced Microsoft to break apart its services. In America, Android and Google's like 50-50, but everywhere else in the world, Android has like 80-something% of the market, right? Like, that's it. You're going to get an iPhone or you're going to get some variant of Android. And so they were using their power around it. Now, I wonder if they say, you know what, we're just not going to give it away free anymore, because you can't say it's open source if I'm forcing you to use my products, right? Or are they just going to say, hey, you can use the Google Play Store without using all our other stuff? Well, and I think they'll be fine. Is my last point. Is that I think that this decision is too little too late. I think
it's not going to do anything.
I think that they have basically established themselves in the market such that even if these things don't, even if your phone doesn't come with Gmail now, or it doesn't come with Chrome pre-installed, you're going to go get it. You can't live without these things now.
And especially all the syncing.
Yeah, and that's sort of how they get you. So, and again, the idea is that the market should have the ability to choose, different products, but they're so large now that you can't. When was the last time somebody said, "I'll Bing something"? Right?
Well, I'm still forced to use Bing. I remember when I told you when we first started doing this, and I was like, I used to have Google Chrome on my laptop, and all of a sudden it's gone, and all I have is Internet Explorer. I remember telling you that, and I don't know what happened to it, but I never bothered to get Chrome back. It takes 2 clicks, but it's just like, whatever, Internet Explorer, whatever.
Well, Edge
it still crashes.
But yeah, so my point is, this should have been done before Google was able to so thoroughly dominate. Now, I don't know that this does anything, and you are right. It is pocket change to them. But I do think that they will appeal because, once the sharks smell blood in the water, this is just the EU. Let's be clear. This will happen in China, and it will happen maybe Google, here, maybe not.
Google's already had their fight with China because they refused to give up a lot of their technology. So China kicked Google out pretty much already. That's why Alibaba is the biggest internet in the world, because they just have 1 billion people right there able to use it. I mean, they have twice the size of the American population is just the Chinese middle class. The rest of the world will smell the blood in the water and start coming after the bits and pieces of American billions and billions of dollars that they just have in cash. They're going to come for it.
But this is the more important thing. If you don't have to sort of take the rest of the Google experience, I think you will see more manufacturers fork versions of Android, just keeping the store.
I agree.
That's the important
But you're
thing.
also seeing that the way that Europeans view privacy and internet and the globalized world is a lot different than the way that Americans view it. And in so much that you can see that everything that they're being fined for over the past couple of years, Apple, Google, Facebook, all of them, that they've been fined for all this stuff in Europe, but not really anything happened here, because it's okay for them to do what they're doing in America, but not in Europe, where privacy is very important to them. Their privacy
also,
rights, the right to know that your information is being sold or transmitted or copied or read by a computer program.
Also, one other thing to think about why this happens outside of the U.S. and not in the U.S. These companies in the U.S. are a big part of the jobs drive. Like, we don't really have coal jobs like that, right? Tech is the new sort of boom in America. And by the way,
it's like the .com boom was the last big one that we had.
Right. And
the housing, and now this.
Well, but I'm not classifying it as a boom like that. I did read a very interesting article that said manufacturing jobs went away, and so will jobs in the digital age. Just that as these technologies become more commoditized, they're releasing a lot of tools that allow you to develop software without using code, and the skills required are the curve is higher and higher, because now you sort of have to, like, anybody can build a web page now, anybody can build a basic application, but what are you doing about data science and machine learning and AI? And that curve is a lot higher, which means less people will qualify for that work, and the easier work,
and thus we add a new generation to the impoverished and lower classes.
Yeah,
they can't adjust to the way the world is now. That's why there's so many angry Trump supporters. They were not able to coexist in the modern society. They thought that the world was out to get them, So they invested themselves and their votes in somebody who said they would bring the old world back, the way things were when.
Rather than looking at the world as it is, they went to someone who told them the world was as they'd like it to be, and they'd rather just someone tell them it will be okay and give them something to blame than actually looking at the real problems and why they are happening. And I think that is all we have. That's all I have for today.
Well, I think you just ran out of air in the room, so yeah.
Anything else you want to say before we get out of here? I'm pretty much done.
I'm excited to see where we're going, just because it's just like a drama or a movie or whatever that you're watching, where it's like, I can't believe the bad guy keeps winning. I want to see how this ends. I do really want to see how this ends. But I'm just really worried that, like the frog in the slowly boiling water, that we're just not fully grasping the context and the detriment that we are causing to our future. And it's not that people aren't speaking up or they aren't trying to protest or do something about it. It's just that it's just happening, and it's like trying to stop the direction of a river. You know, it takes forever to build a dam, and we have no damn time.
I see what you did there. Again, the only thing I would say to all Americans, like, if you're okay with all the things that are happening now, what is going to happen when there is someone in power that utilizes the same tactics, but for the opposing political view? What will happen then, and what will you do then?
Yeah.
How will you feel about it? And again, we have to ask ourselves, is winning the most important thing, right? So you know, yes, the economy is good right now, right? But is that the only barometer?
Exactly.
Instead of looking at what we had to do to get there, right? So it is, if that's what our morals are, that the ends justify the means, then, you know, what makes America so special?
Well, I guess that is for us to grow into and to build for ourselves. There's not really a definition for that. So I think it's a good way to end the show for today. We really appreciate everybody that tuned in. Not a lot of comments today, but I think that's just because people were really just into our conversation and probably got all the information that they needed. Is that what you're telling yourself? Yeah, no, they got all the information they needed. They had no need to question.
No more information left.
Nothing, there's no information left. So we really appreciate anybody that did watch. I noticed a couple people had shared a couple of times. My brother tuned in. My girlfriend, my cousin.
Wait, we have a question. We have a question.
Question away.
Minnie Morales says, what makes the economy good?
The economy is good because we are not in a recession or a war.
Also, there are more jobs available than there are people filling them.
But they all require a 4-year degree, $12 an hour, and your own transportation and fluency in 3 languages.
And also, unless you work in the tech field, you can easily make a 6-figure salary.
Yeah. There's plenty of the stock.
With a bachelor's degree.
We say that the economy is good, as Donald Trump would say, because the stock market is good, which I don't agree with. I don't believe that the economy is amazing. We are doing well. GDP is expected to grow 3%. Listen,
home values are up. GDP is growing.
And the bubble will pop.
Unemployment is down.
Recession is coming.
The economy is currently good. I cannot speak for tomorrow.
The government is bankrupt.
But those are the barometers of what makes the economy well.
But thank you for the question. And I think next week when we get back here, we will probably follow up with, you know, whatever happens with regards to Trump and Putin. But the economy will probably feature in almost every episode of The Second Page, which it has for the past 35 episodes.
Yes.
We've always at least talked about the economy. So I'm glad there's people out there asking those kind of questions.
Yes. Minnie also says it's not good enough. There are low-paying part-time jobs.
Oh, you need 3 or 4 jobs just to afford an apartment. There's not one state in the union where you can live in and afford an apartment on one minimum wage salary. It's impossible. Not one place in this country.
Yes, but like I said, go into tech.
Learn you something new. You got no hands, build some hands, and then learn you something new.
All right, that's all I got.
I think that's
Courtney,
great.
Thank you, Minnie. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Carlos. We appreciate all of you.
Yeah. We sincerely appreciate it. If you haven't already tried, please go over to YouTube and subscribe to our page. Like us on Facebook. Share it with your friends. Message us. whatever you want to do to get in touch. If you want to be on the show, message us and we will tell you how to call in on Skype. And please just tune in every Saturday afternoon between 12 and 1. And we will be here to talk about all the things that you want to talk about. And if we're not, then just tell us and we'll start talking about it. Thank you so much for coming today. Where are they finding us at today? You can still find me on the Facebook, but if you have the urge to tweet at me, Joseph Soswald, or you can send a letter with a self-addressed.
Joseph Soswald.
Yeah, it's SOS too in the middle. You may also send a self-addressed stamped letter with a reply envelope to St. Louis, Missouri, where you will find me on Dubs, Rolling Deep. Please.
Only if you seal the letter with wax.
Yes,
you need your house sigil.
House sigil wax. Where are they finding you at, Steve?
Okay, so you can find me on your favorite social media network, as long as it's not Snapchat, at Steve A.M. Johnson. You can also find me on Mondays now. We moved that show to Mondays, prime time.
Yeah, network.
Between 8 and 10. On The Real, where we keep you up to date in the latest of the world of TV and movies. And you will hear a lot more about James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, getting fired, and Fox and Disney mergers. Comic-Con is this week. It's all kinds of conspiracy going on.
It's all happening right here on the R2 Network.
You can check me out along with Sean and Scoob, or Old Head Wildin' and Scoob, on the 36 Chambers of Fatherhood. And of course, you can check me out here next week, Saturday, every Saturday on the second page. And that's about it.
Yeah.
Oh, please, please, please share this on your social media networks. Tell your friends about it. Tell them to join the conversations so that they can yell at us as well.
Indeed. It's always good to have someone to yell at.
All right, folks. That's it. It's been fun.
It's been indeed a good time. Join us next week. We'll see you. Thank you.
Hugs, not drugs.
But sometimes drugs.